Thanks so much for coming. I really appreciate you all showing up. There we go. I've been a designer now for almost over 25 years. In fact, my first Chi was Chi 89. And it's such an amazing journey. And I would actually say for the people that are getting into design right now, it is so much more interesting to be a designer now. The rate of change, the way technology is working, it's almost like the primal forces that we're playing with right now are so much bigger and better. And to look over these last 25 years to see that now things like the Internet of Things are coming along, and it just challenges us in really interesting ways. But I think it's important that we have an understanding of how this is happening. Let me tell you two different stories. The first is that I am an active user of Kindle, and I've been using it for quite a while, and it's this well-known feature of Kindle that you can read on any device and it synchronizes, so I can be reading on the bus with my phone, and then I can come back to my tab later at night, and it's the same spot. That's called WhisperSync. And it's quite nice, but at one point it came along and said, hey Scott, you got just about a bestseller. For $3 we'll give you the Audible book. And I said, okay, fine. So for $3 I did it, and then I could discover that by listening with my Bluetooth headset I could go for a run, and I was listening to the book, and then by coming back home, it actually synchronized just as well to the cloud, so that when I was reading my Kindle, it was at the exact same place. And I'm not here to, be a shill for Kindle. It was more from the UX design point of view. It was zero experience. It was a zero interface. It just worked. And I was really impressed. I was really that was cool. Now, in contrast, there's this little beastie here, the Bluetooth headset that we all know and love. Now, before I get into the story, I should let you know that I play with my phone a lot. I've been in mobile my whole career, and I'm always installing fun little things into my phone. But the problem is that at night it can kind of beep and boop and make noise, and it's not very, my wife isn't very happy with me at 2 o'clock in the morning when my phone decides to tell me that the humidity is high in Botswana or something like that. And so I've had to figure out how to calm it down and kind of just be calm at night. And finally, I have to be very empathetic. I was asking a lot and it was bothering her a lot, so I finally got the nighttime thing quiet. So one night I got up and I wanted to get a drink in the kitchen, and I noticed that the headset was still on the countertop and I'd left them on. I'm like, oh darn, okay, I should turn them off. I don't want the battery to go dead. So you know how these things are. They have 12 different functions, and there's that little button there. But you can't see it. Here, let's zoom in. Like that button, or that little thing right there, the one that you have to press 12 different ways to do things. So if you press and hold to turn on, and I'm like, oh, I'll just press and hold to turn off. So I press and hold to turn off because I want to turn the battery off. And then all of a sudden it goes, oh, by the way, it's these. They talk to you. It goes, power on. And there's a really chirpy, friendly voice, kind of the digital equivalent of Clippy, And so. And basically it was kind of like, oh, cool, it actually was powered off, and I just did, oh, silly me, it's fine, no big deal. And then I'm like, there should be no problem. Then it goes, connecting. I'm like, connecting? My phone is in the bed. Oh my God, my phone is in the bedroom, it's connecting. It's gonna light up, it's gonna bother my wife. So I'm like, shit. And I'm pushing the button as hard as I can because press and hold. And of course I pushed it the wrong way, and it goes, dialing. I'm like, who are you dialing? Why are you dialing? This is crazy. And of course it goes, ring. And of course the last person I called was my wife, whose phone was on the bedside table. And if anyone says there's not a consequence to bad design, I think I'm a poster child right here. So what are we going to do when we come to the Internet of Things? Which path are we going to take? Is it going to be this effortless, wonderful little thing, or is it going to be this Bluetooth thing from hell? And it's not an idle question, because when we talk about the Internet of Things, it's always like everything is awesome, and everyone's so excited about where we're going with the Internet of Things. And if we're not careful, there's going to be a huge backlash, and not quite be as nice as we think it's going to be. So this is not an idle question at all. So in order to tackle this problem, I was kind of wondering how to present it to you guys and talk about it. I got inspiration about 2 months ago in a Twitter conversation I was having. And they were talking about this lovely pull to refresh gesture on the iOS system, which is really quite lovely. I thought it was quite nice. But what was really fascinating to me is that as they were talking about it, it wasn't just that it was a good animation. The point was, we should all standardize on this. This is what we must be doing. Whoa there, little buckaroo. Wait a second here. What? The mobile has been moving so quickly. To rush to standardization seems a little bit silly. So I basically pushed a little tweet out to say, hasn't pull to refresh outlived its welcome? Just be up to date, please. And it was a little provocational because there's good reasons for pull to refresh. But you'd think I'd shot Pope Francis. The comments that I got back were so strong, it was almost like YouTube level comments. I'm like, guys, wait. There's a lot to talk about here. So they kept pushing this whole idea that it needed to be standardized. So I just wanted to push back a little bit. So I said, that's a really slippery argument. Are you really arguing that we use pull to refresh forever? Because once you've been in this business for a while, you start to see the overall lay of things, and you just try to have the longer view. To which the person replied, well, the steering wheel's been around forever. It's been standardized. Ding. And it's just like, it's never changed, so why can't we standardize other things? I'm like, really? You think the steering wheel is a standard. You think it's stable. How adorable. The internet is wrong. And I had to talk about this. So let's just talk a little bit about the steering wheel, because it's not quite as simple as you think. I just grabbed basically 10 pictures of steering wheels over the last 3 years. And even in our present, it is this fomenting excitement of exchange and trying and goofing around, because effectively it's a new user experience surface. And lots of things are being tried. So to say that the steering wheel is standardized, yes, it's round, but other than that, even this last one isn't really round anymore. So to say that even that now it's not quite what we'd call stable. But if you don't buy that argument, let's talk about the future. What do you think is going to happen in a few years when this comes along? To say that you want to standardize the steering wheel is like saying you want to standardize a buggy whip. Because what's going to happen is that, of course, the need for it will completely go away. But if you didn't buy the present, and you didn't buy the future argument, let's take a look at the past. Because the history of the steering wheel is far more interesting than I ever expected. Because initially, there were no steering wheels. We just had horse and carts. And that was quite an interesting little model, because you didn't really need to have it. It was actually a little autonomous system. When the horse turned, the cart turned with it. Effectively, the horse drove the cart, and you had reins that were basically kind of a whoa and go, and maybe when you got to a fork, you'd say left. But for the most part, there was no real steering mechanism going on. But we actually got to be more active in the steering wheel was the boat, not the steering wheel itself. Now, a quick refresher on boats, for those of you that don't know, the rudder is in the back, because if it's in the front, it gets slapped over, so it's got to be in the back. And when you turn the rudder, it pushes the water to the side, so while you're going forward, it turns the boat into the water. What's interesting is that this was the first steering mechanism we had. So the first cars that were invented, and you can't make this stuff up, had the engine in the back, and the rear wheels also turned in the back. But the part that fascinated me most from a history point of view is that the boat had a tiller and the car had a tiller. And so the first steering wheel wasn't a steering wheel, it was a tiller. You actually had tillers in cars. And what was even more interesting is that this technological flow that got started was quite deep. It wasn't just the physical manifestation of the tiller, it was its use. Because once tillers started to be replaced by the big steering wheels that you'd see on boats, that wheel would actually turn in the same direction that the tiller did. So it would actually turn to the right to go left. And when they put steering wheels in cars, they did the same thing. You would turn right to go left. So you can just see where I'm going with this, that we have a long history of not having steering wheels. And here's Thomas Edison, the man himself, in a 1901 car. Now they've moved forward a little bit. Things have gotten better. He's got his tiller, but now it's in the front, and the steering is in the front. But what I find, as I was reading more and more about it, the thing that really got me interested was the steering wheel has met with such general disfavor in this country that levers, tillers, are almost used exclusively. And what's this idea that people would actually see a steering wheel and turn it down. Now, it's too simplistic to say, oh, those old Victorians, they just didn't like that kind of thing. It was actually a more complicated series of things, because back then the technology was so difficult that when you tried to put a steering wheel on, it would shake too much, it'd be too hard. The rack and pinion steering hadn't developed yet. So as a combination of effectively user acceptance as well as the technology to make the steering wheel possible. And I think this is a much more interesting dialectic here to say, wait a second, is it users or is it technology? And how do you actually move your way across? So to a certain extent, this is what I would call the shape of innovation. And it's something that I believe the Chi community needs to discuss more because it gets to the psychological aspects of how we absorb and work with technology, what blinds us. Because we start off effectively with a brand new technology. And do we use it exactly the way we should be using it, the right way? No. We tend to use it the way old things used to be. We tend to evaluate tomorrow's technologies with yesterday's tasks. And that's why effectively the tiller came along. When we had a car, we didn't do the right thing at first. We actually used the old thing. And that's okay. That's how humans are. That's how we work. And we should embrace that. But then realize that we then have this period of bumpy maturation where we both learn about it more and the technology as well improves and we eventually get to that steering wheel. It eventually matures. And then, of course, something big happens and you get the self-driving car. It then resets the whole thing and you're back to the beginning, and we start over. And now we're going to have the exact same problem with self-driving cars. Because what's going to be our tiller for cars? Do we need front dashboards? Do we need bucket seats? We're going to go through a whole maturation process of reinventing the car again, and our grandchildren are going to look back and say, oh, you had cars with bucket seats, or something like that. And things that we just will assume was obvious today. So we have multiple examples of this pattern in our own work in the technology space. So let's just take a look at the DOS prompt. Okay, the DOS prompt was invented, and its tiller, what it copied, was effectively the teletype. It was just the stream of characters that scrolled off into infinity. And that was what it basically copied. It took a while before we slowly evolved our way, about 10 years later, to something like Lotus 123 with its dynamic character displays. Please, somebody tell me they recognize Lotus 123. Can I just have a show of hands? Okay, for those of you that don't know, it was kind of cool. And it basically was able to redraw the screen, being a little bit more like a dynamic menu system. But it was actually really kind of hot back then. In fact, people today would still claim that they're faster with that form of Lotus than they are today with graphical interface. But I digress. So, but then of course came the modern graphical user interface, and we reset back to the beginning. So it's this constant flow of kind of absorbing the old, maturing into something new, and then revolution back to the beginning. The same thing happened with phones. So we had effectively the original, this is the Nokia 3200, which stole the button menu concept, a single button, the menu that popped up, and then it kind of matured, some would argue, to kind of a ludicrous extent with the N95, which actually had 6 separate menus on 6 separate buttons. And then, of course, the iPhone came out and reset us back again. So you can see this pattern over and over again. We kind of have the old, we slowly work our way into the future, revolve it, and then something comes along and like scares us and blows us back to the beginning. So there are 2 critical psychological points to this shape of innovation, 2 lessons I think we have to learn. The one that I pointed out before is the fact that we have this familiarity. We will always borrow from the past, and we have to somehow transcend it. And we just need to appreciate that and talk about that a little bit more to see what we're borrowing. But the other one I think is also important, and something I've noticed as I've gotten more mature in my career, is this idea of maturity, because it forms a form of intellectual gravity well. It's like, we've worked so damn hard to get here, we're not leaving. It kind of forms this local maximum, and people just don't want to give it up. And I think, coming full circle back to my tweet about the steering wheel, is what ends up happening. The guy that was tweeting about trying to standardize felt like we had somehow gotten to this magical point and it was done. It was like here forever and we could kind of rest. And you can never rest in this business. And I think it's important for us to realize both of these 2 extremes and how we want to, as designers, as Chi people, to break out of this loop. Because the problem with this intellectual gravity well is that it makes it so much harder to want to have a revolution. We kind of get more satisfied in our ways. Of course, we've seen this multiple times with various companies. The classic example here was Windows, which was fine, it did a good job, but then when Microsoft came out with a tablet, the Microsoft tablet, what, mid-90s, somewhere in there? This was like well over 10 years before the iPad, it was the same basic UI. They had kind of gotten their own gravity well, and they just stuck to it. There's nothing wrong with it, but it didn't kind of create the same revolution that the iPad did. So to a certain extent, they were kind of stuck, and they couldn't get out. Now, this has been talked to death. I'm sure many of you have read this book, The Innovator's Dilemma. It talks about how companies get stuck. This book tends to talk about how companies focus on high-end customers more than anything else. But I think we need to talk about us as well. It's kind of our psychological relationship with technology. Because sometimes I don't think the limiting factor is technology. I think it's us and our relationship with it. And I saw this so often at Frog, it kind of broke my heart. I was creative director at Frog for a couple of years in San Francisco. And these companies would come to Frog, and Frog isn't cheap, right? You'd come, and they were so desperate for innovation. Every one of our clients wanted innovation. And we would do the workshops and the brainstorms, and we'd give them all sorts of stuff, and they would drop the vast majority on the floor. Because even though everyone wants innovation, no one wants any risk. And that always kind of puzzled me. Why is that? Because to a certain extent, I think people have gotten their own kind of gravity well. And of course, people really aren't risk averse. They're not really afraid of the future. They're just overly attached to the past. And we joked at Frog that we weren't in the design business. We were in the design therapy business. Because the idea was to talk people off of the ledge, to say, this is why we're doing it. This is why it's a good idea. This is why you need to leave it behind. And it was actually that aspect of speaking to this loop that we actually made more of an impact. It was talking to the humans behind the technology that actually made the innovation happen. And that was a big learning for me. So now, it's like, wait a second. Wasn't this supposed to be about the Internet of Things? What are you doing? Well, the issue is that I feel that the Internet of Things changes everything. Not only how we're going to touch, how we're going to design, how we're going to build, but the very companies we're going to make. And in my discussions over the last couple of years, I've seen so many people with their technology tillers and their intellectual gravity wells, and they just don't understand how stuck they are. And it's important to realize that we have to let go of a few things if we're really going to embrace the Internet of Things. So I just did this Google search, and it's a fun that you can kind of do a search based on time intervals. So I searched in 6-month time slices for Internet of Things market value. And it's kind of insane. I think we all know that there's this exuberance happening right now, and the numbers just get bigger and bigger and bigger. And it doesn't help when we see articles that are written, this was just written in Wired magazine just last year, that was talking about what the Internet of Things is going to be like. And let's just take a look at some of the scenarios they pulled out. I'm not sure if you can read this, but the baby's room tries to soothe him back to sleep. If that doesn't work, it texts you at the next door neighbor's cocktail party. Because all good parents put their kids to sleep and go get sloshed, right? I'm a father of 3, I empathize, but. So, and the other one was more interesting. It was like, the sandwich shop starts your order as you approach. I'm like, wait a second, I'm just going for a walk. Thanks, but no. It's like so many times they don't talk about the false positive aspect of it. They really haven't done decision systems. It's just overly enthusiastic. And here's my favorite one. Smartphone warns of ex-girlfriend ahead. The privacy implications are intense. Obviously, this is done by a 25-year-old goofball. But this is what passes for journalism about the Internet of Things. This isn't helping, okay? This is the Jetsons. Does anybody remember the Jetsons? Sorry. Thank you. Thank you. It's an appropriate metaphor. And it's just this idea that we are like thinking about future metaphors, and we're not really kind of thinking it carefully. And besides, we shouldn't be building things in the Jetsons because you see George steering there, right? He's using a tiller. Can't do that. So when we talk about the Internet of Things, it's just this big wobbly mass of meaninglessness. There's just so many ways to talk about it. We could talk about the Internet of Big Things, the Internet of Everything. We could talk about sensor networks. We could talk about M to M, machine to machine. There's many ways of breaking it down, but let's just talk about the two that tend to get the most press, the stuff that we might be talking about more. And that would be smart devices and home automation, and they're slightly different. So smart devices is going to be things like the Nest, which is kind of, by the way, when the Nest first came out, people thought it was pretty goofy. Now all of a sudden it's kind of like awesome. But it's like, sometimes it takes a little while for the market to kind of understand this stuff. My favorite alternative to that is the quirky egg minder. Has anybody seen the quirky egg minder? Just curious? Okay, yeah, since you haven't, it fits in your refrigerator. You put your eggs in it, and when you're in the store, and you're like, I wonder if I have any eggs at home. You can open up your smart app, it'll tell you, oh, you got 4 eggs. You know, people are trying. To a certain extent, it's kind of cool that people are giving this a shot. But these are focused function devices. They're programming with hardware to a certain extent. The flip side is home automation, which is this idea of more of a cascading coordination of devices. So my calendar talks to my alarm clock, which wakes me up at just the right time. And once I get up, the coffee machine goes on, which then turns on the music. And then where I'm going is told to my car. And so there's this lovely cascade of Jensonianness. And it's not that I'm against this. I actually feel like we're going to get there eventually, but I can't get my TV to talk to my Blu-ray player with an HDMI cable right now. So the idea that everyone's going to be able to like talk nicely just seems a little far-fetched at this point. But we can't not talk about it. It's important. It's just hard is what I'm saying. And the other issue at home automation that I find most challenging is the somewhat naive approach that people are thinking about it. I actually wrote a blog post about this, but let me just show you this video. This is by NinjaSphere. This guy's got a Bluetooth bracelet on, which broadcasts his location, and there's a little device that basically tracks it throughout the house. And as you move through the house, it turns on your lights. So he's walking through there, the hallway. Here's the room. He kind of comes in, light goes on. He goes into the kitchen, and to save energy, the light goes off. And then boom, he comes back with his glass of wine. Awesome. And then he keeps on going, and then he heads towards the properly lit couch. Now, I'm not making fun of this. This is actually fairly cool. People see this? This thing asked for $50,000, and it raised like $350,000. It was a hugely successful Kickstarter project. And it's fairly cool for single guys living alone. No, it's this idea that everything is awesome because we can automate it now. We're getting so excited by the technology that we get excited and we can kind of build these very simplistic, narrow things that look pretty cool. But let's just see a little bit what they were doing, okay? What were they envisioning? They basically turned the home lighting system into a switch and a light. And they were kind of modeling that. And their approach right then was to focus on the light switch, replacing the light switch with this thing called a NinjaSphere, so they could turn the light switch on and off. And that works because it's so easy to do. And again, this idea about how we're using our technology, they tackled the easier problem because it's a little bit easier to tackle the light switch than it is the actual light itself. But let's just walk through a little bit more, shall we say, sophisticated example. So I walk into my bedroom. The room is empty, and there's a simple motion sensor, so the light turns on. Perfect. Everything is awesome, right? But now, my wife is sleeping. My wife, who, of course, is long suffering of my trials in technology. So I'm walking in, my wife is sleeping, and of course, the light wakes her up. Not good, right? Oh, no problem, Mr. Jenson. We'll just add a few more sensors. Better sensors will fix this problem at all. Okay, maybe. But let's now imagine that I walk in and my dog is sleeping on the bed. Well, I don't want the light. I don't mind if the light goes on. Oh, well, we need even better sensors. Don't worry. And it's starting to sound a little bit like adding more nuclear shielding to a nuclear reactor at this point. But it's like, okay, fine, if we can keep adding more sensors, we'll eventually catch this case. But then, to me, the killer case is my wife is watching TV, I walk into the room, the lights don't turn on, and she goes, I can't find the TV remote. Can you help me find it? Well, that's just like, just read my mind, right? I think the problem we're doing is that the Internet of Things is not a set of if-then-else rules, for the simple fact that humans are goofy. We like poetry. We do things that aren't exciting. We have surprise parties. Wouldn't you love to be in a home with this thing and try to have a surprise party? Turn off the light. So the problem is that we are not thinking of this the right way. It's kind of technology up, not human down, okay? So there's a lovely discussion about this actually with 1960s AI technology, Moravec's paradox. And he talked about the fact that it's actually fairly easy to emulate a high-level intellectual task by a computer, but fairly hard to do something that a 2-year-old could do in terms of vision and mobility. And that's created two types of AI problems, hard, easy, and easy, hard. kind of a fun little play on words. But hard, easy were problems that we thought were hard that turned out to be easy, like chess. We thought that the computer had to be cunning and have all sorts of strategy, where actually just throwing hardware at the problem and doing a depth search actually was quite easy. So we've kind of, quote unquote, solved the computer problem, even though we thought it was hard. The flip side is an easy, hard problem. They literally thought that translation was going to be easy. Just a big enough dictionary, plop the words down, and you're done. And it turned out to be obviously much harder. And I would claim that the Internet of Things, particularly home automation, is an easy, hard problem. We don't give it effectively the depth and the appreciation that it deserves. I'm not a Luddite here. I actually am very supportive of this type of thing, but we need to kind of figure it out a little bit more. What we should be thinking about here is, what is the technology tiller? What are these guys dragging from the past into it? And I would claim what they're doing is they're focusing on the switch. That was the obvious thing to focus on. And what we should be thinking about is the light itself. Because right now, we're forced by technology to think of things in a certain way. Go back to the original use of levers versus steering wheels. The reason why you did it was because that was all that you could do at the time. Once you have the ability to switch and control anything, the very concept of what a light will be will change. We won't have a monolithic light that turns on, but many things can turn on. TVs can become night lights, and all sorts of lights can be then put into your system that you would normally not wire up to a hard switch. So this changes the problem entirely, which is to say, hey, is the room empty? That should be a fairly easy, completely empty. Well, if so, then turn on whatever light switches you want. But if someone is there, anyone is there, a dog is there, anyone is there, then go into conservative mode. Okay? Turn on the floor lighting. And by the way, I have friends who are now installing LED floor lighting for just this reason. Because you can turn on floor lighting and it's safe. That can be automated quite easily, and no one's going to get woken up, no one's going to bother anybody. But then have the humility to let the user know what's going on. So if you were to have a wearable, and there's many ways we can talk about this, but I'm going to assume a wearable for now, effectively kind of have it go zzz, like, I really want to turn on the light, sir. I really want to turn the light, but I don't, because something's wrong. So effectively, you extend the light switch to the user. So it's like, oh yeah, light's on, turn it on. So we don't replace the switch, we extend the switch. The whole idea is that we need to basically realize that we need to be building our systems that expect us to be human and not punish us for when we are. And instead of replacing the switch, we extend it. I think that's a much better model for us to be thinking about it. So now let's move from home automation to smart devices. And this is an area that I've been working with quite a bit. Because I think we're starting to see a lot of smart devices, but it's changing quite a bit. Because right now, every single device has its own application. And that's cool, because it's kind of the only way to do it. Again, it's the way the tiller was kind of worked. We have no we could use the web, but it's just really hard for it to kind of find these devices right now. But if we believe in Moore's law at all, there's going to be 10, and then 50, and 1,000 of these devices. And are we really going to have an app for every smart device on the planet? It just becomes absurd at some point. So the technology tiller here is the fact that applications are effectively going to be holding us back. It becomes something that the user's got to jump through. It was frustrating. At Frog, we would be building experiences for users, and we try to steer them to a web page. Like, no, we have to have an app. Everybody has an app. Apps are cool. App. It was kind of like app myopia. And then we'd build it for them, and they go, nobody downloads our app. And we're like, guys, so in fact, it was that frustration that made me kind of go on this tirade a little bit. The problem is that apps just don't scale. We may be able to get away with it in our home with a few devices, but imagine if this starts to kind of escape out into the broader public space, restaurants, buses, trains, movie posters, vending machines. This could be a really kind of expansion of information and interactivity throughout the space, and it is just not acceptable that we're going to install an app for every single one of those. Because to a certain extent, there's going to be a range of devices. Something like the Nest, which is practically an iPhone, down to a bus stop, which is just basically a post in concrete. And everything has something to tell us, a little bit of information. And I call this the just-in-time interaction model. Because you just want to basically use something and then lose it. You don't want to keep it around forever. And how do you kind of encourage that type of interaction? This is what led me to write a blog post about 2 years ago called Mobile Apps Must Die. and it got a lot of press. But it was a little misunderstood because people kept saying, well, Scott, native apps are awesome. Come on, like, how can the web compete? I'm like, I don't care. Yes, native is awesome. It's completely awesome, and web kind of can't compete, but that's not the point. The point is that we want to do little stuff. So let's take a look at the toaster, the smart toaster. Everybody loves to talk about toaster. There was a tweet about it about a year ago. I don't think my smart toaster needs apps. It's like, guys, you're kind of criticizing my idea with your paradigm. It's like, I'm not going to play World of Warcraft on my toaster, okay? It's like this idea that we want the iPad to be put into my refrigerator or my toaster is kind of missing the point, and that's part of a sign that it's a technology tiller. They're kind of bringing the old in and misappropriating it, not using it correctly. It's better to, I think of the smartness in 3 layers. There's some value that comes from terminology. The one that everybody jumps on is the coordination layer. That's the home automation. My coffee pot talks to my drapes, that talks to my music player. That's fine. It's hard, it's complicated, we'll get there, but that's where everybody seems to think it's all exciting. Like I said before, that's a little Jetson-y, and so I think that we'll get there, but let's take some easier things. Control is a little bit more interesting. It's what we're seeing right now with native apps, like the smart washing machine, the smart coffee maker, the smart egg thing, whatever. There's all sorts of things that's just one object and one means of talking to it, and that's getting some traction, and it's still early days. We're playing with that. But the one that people don't really think about too much is this idea about discovery. What happens if I could just know that there was a smart device there, and it just had, say, a URL? Just to kind of give me a little bit of information. It's not an app, it's just a URL. Or think of it as kind of a QR code. But the problem with QR codes is they suck, right? They're terrible. And if you talk about having a wireless QR code, everyone kind of goes, why? That's so dumb. And so it's like, wait a second, let's think this through, because to a certain extent, if we were to have, say, smart URLs in the environment, imagine just how little bits of information could be useful. So imagine you're in a museum, and every exhibit has a little URL that just gives you a tiny bit of information. And especially if you're wearing something like Google Glass, you could literally walk through the entire place and get a little paragraph of information every place you walked and literally do nothing. It's just 500 characters per thing as you walk past. Or say, for example, that you ended up having a poster, and that poster could just give you a V card of when it's happening, so you'd remind yourself to then go to that. Or effectively a pizza place just wants you to have a phone number, and you just call it. These aren't apps. These aren't even web pages. This is just tiny bits of data that's just being squirted to your phone. But if you wanted to go up a level, you can imagine something like a printer at your work, where basically if you have any problems, it takes you to the page, please try these 3 things. If not, call this number. It's just a web page on demand. Or something like a pill bottle. So instead of having that 18-folded onion skin thing in 6 languages to tell you what you're going to do with this, it actually says your language, 1 YouTube video, done. Just getting the right information to you. You can personalize it because it knows your cookie. Or something like a bus stop. This I really think is important because a lot of cities are experimenting with city bus apps, but not only do you have to launch them, you've got to like use the GPS and figure out where you are and then choose the right bus line. You've got to like drill down. It's like, no, this bus stop has 1 bus. When's it coming? Thank you much. I just want to have like 1 number in front of me. It kind of inverts the whole app model. Or something even more interactive, like a smart parking meter or a smart vending machine. What Uber does for taxis, this could do for any type of vending machine. It just basically takes all the money out of it, makes it much more cleaner and faster for you to do. Or if you even want to do something like smart bicycle rental. So again, the reason why I'm giving you all of these examples to maybe beat a dead horse a little bit is that if we lose apps, we can start to think small. We're thinking in a totally different way. You would never write an app for any one of these things. Or if you would, it wouldn't get downloaded very much. It's a whole new way of unlocking information and interactivity. So this is actually what I'm working on at Google, but it's meant to be an open system, this idea that the web needs a discovery service. We need to realize that we're being stuck between tiller and steering wheel. We are not moving forward because we don't have the right tools. And so what I'm trying to come up with is a system of discovery, so smart devices can broadcast their URLs to anybody, and then when you walk into the room, you can basically then discover that with a small little bit of software in your phone, so that you can then rank these things, and then just go to that web page. Think of it as like not Googling cyberspace, you're Googling your room. That's it. It's not a complicated idea. And it's just meant to be effectively like a proximity DNS. You're just basically taking the web and just pushing it into the physical space. So the idea behind this is really that everything just has a web page, but because it's a URL, URLs are so awesome. They can be done in so many ways. They could deep link into an application if you want to. They can be a telephone number. They can be an email. There's many, many things you can do with the URL. URLs can even be dynamically generated if you want to make it completely obscure. Instant interaction, you just walk up and use. And then again, as I said before, there's no app installer, manager, delete. It's a whole new way of thinking about getting to things quickly. And of course, it encourages this new lightweight model. So what I'm trying to come up with here is this idea of an ecosystem where we basically have devices broadcasting information and then smart displays listening to it, creating this just-in-time ecosystem. But this has to be done in an open way. This has to be done with the community. This can't be done by one company. And yes, I totally feel like a starry-eyed dreamer sometimes, because this is something that can't be done by one company. It has to be done by a whole community of people. And I've been told, I can't tell you how many ways this is an impossible idea. But we often forget that the delta between Netscape and Gmail was 10 years. Maybe I'm more of a terraforming guy than a venture capitalist, but I believe in the long term here. And if we don't know what we want, that's kind of what we're going to get. So we have to realize that we need to break outside of these kind of proprietary bounds, because so many companies are saying that, well, we're not going to do this. But remember the internet back in the 90s? Again, I have a lot of old analogies, but does anybody remember these companies? Prodigy, CompuServe? They were trying to be the Apple of the internet. Oh, don't worry, the internet's scary. We just work. Come to us. We're safe. And they actually were kind of cool. I'm not knocking any one of these companies, but the problem is that the internet was exponential. They just couldn't possibly keep up. And the internet didn't win because it had a better user experience. It won because it just had the content. And I think the exact same thing is going to happen to the Internet of Things. It's just going to grow so fast that no one company is going to be able to save us. Because in this world of technology ideas, I feel like there's really only two kinds of ideas. There's truck ideas or there's road ideas. Because some companies like FedEx, great companies, but they're built on public access to municipal roads, usually free roads. And then the road ideas are things like, the internet. And the problem right now is that in this world of get-rich-quick schemes and flipping your company and making a lot of money, nobody wants to build roads. I've taken these ideas to venture capitalists, and they go running screaming because I can't flip them in 6 weeks. The problem, of course, then is companies are just building nothing but trucks. And then they tend to build their own toll roads. And then they sue people for using their toll roads. It's like not kind of going in the right direction. Does anybody know this guy, Malcolm McLean? Just curious if you've heard. This guy is my hero. He was the He was the Steve Jobs of shipping in the 1950s. He basically built and he created this thing called the container. You've seen container ships. This was the guy. And by enabling container ships, he was able to make it 26 times cheaper to load and unload stuff from boats. The guy made a killing, and he had it all patented. And what did this guy do? He gave it all away. He literally took all of his patents and gave it to the ISO standards body and standardized the whole thing. He was made Maritime Man of the Century by them because he did such an awesome thing. And what was this guy, some kind of communist pinko? No, he was a hard-nosed businessman who realized instead of having 75% of this, he'd rather have 25% of that. And by floating everyone's boat, sorry, the pun, he actually is able to have and he made a killing. He made even more money. And we don't have people like that thinking anymore. And I think that, it's so amazing to me that someone from the 60s was so much more aware of market forces and long-term thinking than today. We have a lot to learn from these guys. So, and I've been told so many times, but Scott, the big companies won't go for this. I'm like, fine. They don't have to. But there's so much interesting happening right now. There's the open hardware movement. There's the open software movement. And while there's clearly an awful lot of issues with crowdfunding, it's still an interesting experiment. And there's a lot of activity going on to kind of create new things. And it's so much easier to build on top of other things. I made an interactive vending machine in a couple of weeks, just using a Raspberry Pi and Node. It was astounding that I could do this in my spare time. What you're capable of doing is amazing right now. And so what will probably happen is not that we'll start the next Apple, but 2 or 3 really fun things are going to happen that's going to start to create this idea. This isn't meant for the mall, it's meant for the Maker Faire. And it's going to be establishing these memes, and things are going to grow, and as soon as some open system gets started, it's going to gain PR traction, and eventually the big boys are going to listen. Because it's how the mammals are going to beat the dinosaurs. This is maybe a little bit naive thinking, but I feel an awful lot of exciting things are happening in this space. So in thinking about the future, it's so easy to be blinded by the giants of our day. I worked at Apple. I very much appreciate what Apple has done. I'm not trying to criticize them. All I'm saying is their success has blinded us. We are now kind of excited about touch and swipe systems. We're excited about applications. We're excited about app stores. And that's not the only trick in the book. We've got to leave that tiller behind and move to something else. So the 3 basic points I want to leave you with is we need to think about, as a community, the shape of innovation, realize the sociology of design, how it affects us. Also understand that apps are our technology tiller. They're great, but they're going to hold us back, and we need to think bigger. And finally, the physical web is something that we need to do as a team, as a community. We need to do it in an open way and figure out a way to kind of move past that. So thank you so much for listening to me. I very much want this to be a conversation. I want to talk to you guys more later, so please find me afterwards and let's keep talking. Thank you so much. Power to people.
Great job. Thank you. Great talk.
Thank you so much for the talk. It was really inspiring and a lot of thought-provoking ideas. We got a number of questions, and I have sort of put one in I have put one together that resulted from several ideas that came out of the audience. And it's about sort of security, privacy, visibility. Mm-hmm. So I think you had this example, the guy walks through the house, and there was the question really, do we really think we get this secure and we sort of make it? And if we do things like we tell people what's happening, if we sort of give it into the visible space, mm-hmm. we will end up with millions of notifications with every step we do. Yeah. Do you have any idea how we can solve that?
Oh, yeah. Well, I think it's how we break the problem down. First of all, the first question I always get is security. And there's no way to, how can I phrase this? The fastest way to ruin any user interface is to add security to it. All right? Not that security isn't important, but usually security is slapped on. Security needs to be built in deep. So I get this question a lot, and that's why, to be honest, right now what I'm trying to do in this experiment that I'm working on is to work on public spaces, where it's quite all right. I mean, these places want you to find them. It's quite open. So let's maybe learn from the obvious safe places, because right now I completely agree. I don't want my neighbor knowing I got a new 120-inch television, right? So I think to a certain extent we should start with the safe places first and see what we learn, and then cautiously go into public space. But the lovely part about URLs is they're so malleable. And there's no reason why we can't have a rotating ID on a URL that then when it goes to the website can then decode that. So therefore it's completely obscure until you have logged in. So there are techniques we can talk about to solve that problem.
Perhaps going a bit deeper on this one. So I think I really like the idea of having this easy way of accessing things. But if you look at the example that was in that video, it's completely invisible to the person that there is computing behind. I think we have this demand to reduce cognitive load for the scenario. But the moment we make it in a way that people understand what's going to happen, that they see I have triggered this action has caused this effect, we increase cognitive load. So I think that's the question. Do we sort of on one side if we go along the line and say we don't care, we don't tell people, they can't really make informed decisions. They have this problem that the space does something and they don't know it. either, or we go the other way and they get millions of notifications.
Well, there's two separate questions there. One is about cognitive load and notifications. I strongly feel that this needs to be equivalent to Googling the room, which means I open something up and I ask for it. There's absolutely no way that this thing should be buzzing in my pocket when I walk past something. That's been kind of the ultimate marketer's dream since the 90s when I was in London working at Symbian. And marketers have always revisited this vision of, hey, I want to send you an ad, and nobody ever wants that. But for 20 years, they've been asking for it. So the notification thing has got to die. Okay, so that's the first step. As far as cognitive load, I'm not quite sure how to answer that because I think that this will be a growing environment. And going back to my light example, I would think that as long as we're turning on lights in a safe, cautious way, then it's kind of like, oh, my light's going on. Oh, that's, it's something that is kind of nice and gentle. And then if we can actually have me be in control by having the light switch on my wrist, that I think gives me like, oh, I'm in charge. It's once the user feels that they're out of control, that's when we lose them.
So something to follow up when you talk about sort of gradually introducing some of these concepts and ideas. A big part of knowing if a vision is going to truly work or a new technology is going to work is not just the vision, but evaluation, and it's something we do as a scientific community. But for these large-scale, ubiquitous technologies and systems, what is the right way to evaluate these systems?
That's a hard question. That's a very hard question. I mean, it's why I'm very excited to be on the Chrome team, because the Chrome team realizes that this needs to be an experiment. And that's why we're kind of at Google I/O, I'm going to be rolling this out and talking about this ability for these devices to broadcast to see what happens. This needs to be much more, I think, of a request for comment approach and not a fait accompli. Because then we need to discover it together and say, oh, wait a second, Scott, you completely forgot about something here. So to me, I feel like this is something that we should be a little bit more humble about and say, I think there's a pony there, but let's approach it cautiously. And so I think, so that's actually my approach, which is to say, let's just kind of walk slowly and try it and not sell it as complete standards.
Great.
Okay.
So I have a very short one, I think. Isn't the browser itself a tiller? And I think you just said you're on the Chrome team, so probably the answer is no, but we have some explanation for it.
Oh, I actually think the browser is totally a tiller. I mean, imagine, okay, we have this wonderful thing called the DOM, and we all get excited about the DOM. What is on top of the DOM? A URL bar. That's a DOS prompt to the web. Okay, we're typing little tiny, it's like, that's so old. So of course the browser's a tiller. My point is to say the DOM is awesome, the browser sucks. So let's get the DOM in front of people as quickly and lightly. I mean, all these apps right now are using the sensors on our phone. Why can't the browser use the sensors on your phone? So I'm trying to effectively go beyond the browser with this.
So if the browser's the tiller, what are sort of 2 or 3 or 4 of the options that are out there, what replace this tiller?
Well, what I've been talking about is to say, let's, the superpower of the web is this kind of like interactivity on demand. That's exactly what native apps can't do. So let's try to figure out how to keep that. So if we were to have effectively some type of agent running in the background, so the obvious thing for Google to do, and other companies could do different things, and I want to encourage other companies to do, but if you were to slide over for Google Now on your phone, you could just see the devices, and you tap on it, it would just take you to that page. You'd skip the browser entirely, you just go into a full Chrome window. So that, to me, would be the idea, is that you say, when I want to look, I'll see it, and I'll go there.
Right. So I'm not sure this is a question, more of a statement or request. It says, I enjoy making my own food, don't make it more efficient.
Okay.
So
I encourage them to walk to work in the snow, too.
Yeah, so I guess the question in there is, how do we know sort of when to stop in terms of smart environments? When are we efficient enough?
I'm always amazed how whenever something useful comes around, there's a certain approach to take it to the crazy extreme to prove that we're losing our souls. I mean, Google doesn't make me dumb. As a programmer, Google has made me unbelievably smart. But I make sure that I use it the right way. So if I'm smart enough to solve a problem, I'm smart enough to use a tool appropriately. So these tools need to be done appropriately, and I certainly don't want my food cooked for me. So I think I always amaze people, same thing with phones controlling your life. They have an off switch. It's your own damn fault for turning it off. I mean, so like I turn my phone off when I get home, right? So I think it's the issue of us trying to use it appropriately.
Right.
Okay, so I have one more on the technical side. You had this nice graph where you compared the point before the revolution comes as sort of this minimum in your graph.
Oh, right.
And I think finding that minimum is pretty easy, but sort of from a technology perspective, it's very often hard to know if you're in a local minimum or in the global minimum. And I think usually when those revolutions happen, what are good indicators for us to understand when we basically throw the thing away? So I think we have seen this with a lot of technologies. You showed it. Basically, how could have Nokia known that the N95 was a global maximum and not a local one?
After a couple of beers, I can tell you some more stories about Nokia. But
We have beer.
But I think the issue in particular with a lot of these companies is the fact that they became so entrenched in their particular model. That makes my point for me so strongly that to a certain extent they believe they have so much to lose they can't let it go. As a positive example, we should take a look at HP in the 90s. HP constantly in the 90s was introducing new printers that were eating their old model, and they were fearless about it, and they reaped the benefits. So we should be celebrating those successes, pointing to them and saying, we need more HP printer type approaches, because they proved it could be done.
I completely agree, but I want to go back to that. So I think the question is, if I know that I'm in a local minimum, and basically, and that's really low, and there is sort of something I can dig much deeper in the same direction, I probably, I'm quite successful. But if I'm sort of at this absolute, are there indicators? And I think you had this example of the touch screen. What are things sort of from a design perspective? Is it sort of the leveling out of features? Are there things you know which we can sort of watch out for to jump?
I don't think you can create an algorithm for brilliance.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I think that these leaps that were made were clearly done by very smart people. And I think, I always felt like, do you remember that scene from Amadeus when Salieri was talking about the fact that he was gifted enough to appreciate how brilliant Mozart was? That's how I felt when the iPhone was released. It was stunningly amazing for what they didn't do. And to me, what was totally amazing about the iPhone is what it didn't do. And someone just had the courage to give it a shot and then really push on something else. So sometimes it just takes a very, very big leap for someone to do really right. And I don't know if you can bottle that or not. My point in pointing it out was to say, at least if we know we're in kind of a gravity well, we can at least try harder.
Well, I wish we had more time for questions, but unfortunately we do not. But again, we really appreciate your wonderful talk. I really enjoyed the little bits of sense of humor you injected into it. I think everyone was compelled and hopefully inspired by your talk. So thank you again.
So enjoyed coming. Thank you.